Imagine a small wooden cabin hidden deep inside an enormous forest, so far from the nearest town that there are no streetlights, no traffic, no neighboring houses, and no distant sounds of people going about their day. There is only the forest, a narrow road, a warm little cabin, and the gentle sound of rain falling through thousands of leaves. You are supposed to stay there for only a few days, just long enough to escape your usual routine and spend some quiet time somewhere peaceful. But there is something unusual about this particular place that you do not know yet. It rains here, not for an hour, not for an afternoon, and not simply because you happen to arrive during a storm. It rains continuously, day after day, until eventually you begin to wonder whether the clouds above the forest have forgotten how to disappear. And tonight, we are going to imagine what it would be like to stay. Not to spend one rainy weekend in a cabin, but to remain there long enough for the rain to become part of your life, for the forest to change around you, and for the sound of water against the roof to become as familiar as your own breathing. So settle in, let your eyes become heavier, and imagine that for now, you have nowhere else you need to go. The cabin is waiting. The forest surrounds it. The fire is already warm, and outside the rain is falling. Arriving at the cabin, you arrive late in the afternoon after driving for what feels like hours along a road that has slowly become narrower and quieter until the paved surface disappears entirely and is replaced by a winding path surrounded on both sides by tall trees. Branches reach overhead and form a dark green tunnel above the car, while rain runs down the windshield in long streams, and every few moments the headlights catch a branch, a moss-covered rock, or a curtain of mist drifting between the trees. It is not a violent storm, and there is no thunder shaking the forest, only a steady and patient rainfall that seems to have been going on long before you arrived and gives no indication that it intends to stop anytime soon. Then, as the road curves around the side of a hill, you see something through the trees. A cabin. It sits alone in a small clearing surrounded by tall pine trees with a dark wooden roof, a narrow chimney, a covered porch, and one warm yellow window glowing softly against the gray afternoon. For a moment, you simply sit inside the car and look at it, because after so much darkness and forest, the little patch of warm light feels almost welcoming enough to make the journey seem worth it. You turn off the engine, and as soon as the sound of the car disappears, the rain becomes the only thing you can hear. It lands gently on the roof of the car, taps against the windshield, moves through the branches, and disappears into the wet earth below, creating a steady sound that is almost impossible to separate into individual drops. You open the door, and cool, damp air moves across your face while the smell of wet soil, pine needles, moss, and wood fills the air around you. You take your bag from the back seat and walk toward the cabin, feeling the wooden steps shift slightly beneath your feet as you climb onto the porch. Then you reach the front door, turn the handle, and step inside. Inside the cabin, the first thing you notice is the warmth. The cabin is small, but it feels carefully made for comfort with wooden floors beneath your feet, thick beams across the ceiling, a simple kitchen in one corner, a large table near the window, a soft chair facing the fireplace, and a staircase leading to a small bedroom upstairs. Everything is made from wood, and the entire room carries the faint smell of pine and smoke, as though the cabin has been warm and occupied for a very long time. A fire is already burning in the fireplace, and you stand there for a moment with your hands loosely at your sides, listening to the soft crackling of the flames while the rain continues outside. You place your bag beside the wall, and walk slowly through the room, noticing a small bookshelf filled with old novels, a stack of thick blankets folded neatly beside the chair, a kettle sitting near the stove, several candles on a wooden shelf, and an old clock ticking quietly somewhere behind you. You walk to the window. Tiny drops of rain cover the glass, and beyond them, the forest appears soft and blurry, with dark tree trunks disappearing into mist and branches moving slightly whenever the wind passes through. You take out your phone and check for a signal, but there is almost nothing. You try again. Still nothing. For a moment, you think that might be inconvenient, but then you place the phone face down on the table and realize that, strangely enough, you do not mind. There is no reason to answer anything right now. There is no reason to check anything. You sit in the chair beside the fire, stretch your legs out in front of you, and listen as the rain, the clock, and the fire slowly settle into one quiet rhythm. For the first time in a long while, you have nowhere you need to be. The first evening. Outside, the sky gradually becomes darker, although it is difficult to tell exactly when afternoon turns into evening, because the clouds are so thick that the forest has already been dim for hours. You make yourself something warm to drink and carry the cup toward the window, where you stand for a while, watching the trees disappear into darkness. There is almost nothing else to see. Now and then, a branch moves in the wind, and every few seconds a drop of water slides down the glass, catching what little light remains before disappearing below the window frame. You begin to notice how many different sounds exist within the simple sound of rain, because some drops strike the roof with a soft tapping rhythm, while others fall onto leaves, the wooden porch, the ground, and shallow pools that have already formed around the cabin. Each surface produces a slightly different sound, and somehow all of those sounds blend together into one continuous rhythm that fills the entire cabin. You take another sip of your drink, settle deeper into the chair, and notice that your shoulders have begun to relax without you even realizing it. Your thoughts move more slowly. Tomorrow seems far away. Next week feels even farther. For the first time in a long while, you are not waiting for anything. You are simply sitting, listening to the rain, watching the fire, and allowing the evening to pass. The first night. Eventually, you decide to go upstairs, where the cabin becomes quieter beneath the sloping roof. There is a small bedroom with a wooden bed, a bedside table, a simple lamp, and a large window overlooking the forest, where water continues sliding down the glass in thin, winding paths. You open the curtains slightly and look outside. The forest is almost completely black now, and beyond the trees there is no visible road, no distant building, and no hint of the world you left behind. There is only darkness, rain, and the occasional movement of branches. You climb into bed, pull the blankets over yourself, and listen. At first, you can still hear the fire downstairs and the faint ticking of the old clock. But after a few minutes, those sounds seem to disappear into the background, leaving mostly the steady rainfall above you. You begin to wonder whether the weather will change by morning. Perhaps it will. Surely it will. Rain comes and goes, and by tomorrow the clouds may have moved on, leaving behind a bright sky and a forest shining beneath the morning sun. With that thought in your mind, you close your eyes, and eventually you fall asleep. Morning. When you wake, there is no alarm waiting for you. For a moment, you do not know what time it is, because the room is still dim, and the light coming through the curtains is soft and gray. Then you hear it, the rain, still falling, exactly as it was the night before. You remain still for a while, listening to the water moving across the roof, and there is something strangely comforting about realizing that the weather has not changed while you were asleep. Eventually, you get out of bed, walk downstairs, and add another log to the fireplace, watching the flames slowly return as the wood begins to burn. You make yourself a simple breakfast, perhaps warm bread with fruit and something hot to drink, and then sit beside the window while the forest slowly becomes visible through the morning mist. Everything is green. The tree trunks are dark with moisture, water hangs from the branches, the ground is covered in wet leaves, and small streams are beginning to form between the roots and stones. It is beautiful in a way that ordinary sunny mornings rarely are. You check your phone again. Still no signal. You think briefly about walking toward the edge of the forest to find a connection, but when you look back at the cabin and hear the rain against the window, the idea suddenly feels unnecessary. There is nowhere else you need to be. Day 2. You spend the morning reading, sitting beside the fire with one of the old books you found on the shelf. The pages are slightly yellow, the cover is worn, and there is no note anywhere explaining who owned it before you. But there is something strangely comforting about reading a story that someone else once held in their hands, while the same rain that surrounds you now fell somewhere outside this cabin. Every so often you look up from the page and glance through the window. The rain is still there. It has become a constant background to everything you do, and instead of listening for each individual drop, you begin hearing it as one long, gentle sound that fills the space around you. It almost feels as though the cabin itself is breathing. At lunchtime, you make a simple bowl of soup, warm some bread, and watch the kitchen windows slowly fog from the heat. Outside, water gathers along the porch and runs between the trees in small streams, while the forest remains wrapped in the same soft gray light. You begin to wonder how long the rain has actually been falling. Perhaps it started yesterday, perhaps earlier, and perhaps somewhere in this forest, the people who built the cabin knew something about the weather that you did not. The forest in the rain. In the afternoon, you put on your jacket, pull the hood over your head, and step outside. The rain touches your face immediately, cool and gentle, while the smell of wet pine, moss, soil, and leaves surrounds you. You walk slowly along the path, listening to water landing on the hood of your jacket and running down the branches overhead. The forest seems richer in the rain. Every surface is darker. Every shade of green feels deeper, and tiny drops cling to leaves until the occasional movement of the wind sends them falling toward the ground. Eventually, you find a small stream. It would probably be barely noticeable during a normal week, but after so much rain, the water is moving faster and spreading farther across the stones. You stand beside it for a while and watch the current bend around the rocks before continuing deeper into the forest. Then you keep walking until you reach a clearing. In the middle of it sits an old wooden bench, partly covered with moisture. You sit down, pull your hood back, and listen. The rain falls through the branches above you, the stream moves somewhere nearby, and the forest seems so quiet that for a moment it feels as though you have stepped outside ordinary time. And that is when you realize something. You are no longer waiting for the rain to stop. You are simply enjoying being in it. The first week. A few days pass, then a few more, until you begin to lose track of exactly how long you have been there. There is no alarm to wake you, no commute to catch, no appointment you need to prepare for, and no schedule that needs to be followed, so your days begin to develop their own gentle rhythm. Morning comes, you make breakfast, spend some time reading, walk through the forest, cook something warm in the evening, and eventually return to the chair beside the fire while rain continues tapping softly against the roof. Then night comes. You climb the stairs, pull the blankets over yourself, and listen until sleep arrives. The cabin begins to feel less like somewhere you are staying and more like somewhere you belong. You start noticing little details you never noticed when you first arrived, such as the floorboard that creaks beside the kitchen, the window that rattles slightly when the wind changes, the exact way firelight moves across the wall, and the different sounds the rain makes depending on where it lands. The cabin has its own personality now, its own rhythm, and slowly, without realizing it, so do you. A new routine. Your mornings become simple. You wake, open the curtains, listen to the rain for a while, and make something warm before settling into the chair beside the window. Eventually, you begin keeping a small notebook on the table, not because there is anything important you need to record, but because you have so much time that writing down the little things begins to feel natural. You write about the color of the forest. You write about the stream. You write about the smell of wood burning in the fireplace and the strange shape of a cloud you noticed through the window. Some days you write for 10 minutes. Other days you sit there for an hour without writing anything at all, and you begin to realize that time feels different here. It no longer feels like something chasing you. It simply passes. The endless rain. Eventually you realize that the rain has not stopped even once. Not for an hour, not for a few minutes. Not even long enough for the forest to become completely dry. You begin paying closer attention to the sky, and every morning you see the same heavy layer of clouds stretching across the horizon. By afternoon, rain continues. By evening, rain continues. And when you wake during the night, rain is still falling against the roof. For the first time, you begin to understand that this may not be ordinary weather. There are no clear skies, no stars, no warm afternoon sunlight breaking through the trees. The forest exists almost entirely beneath gray clouds. You sometimes look upward through the branches and wonder whether the sun is still shining somewhere above them. You begin to realize that the rain is no longer just something happening outside the cabin. It has become the wall that separates your little world from everything beyond it. Inside, there is warmth, firelight, books, food, and quiet. Outside, there is water, the world outside. One afternoon, curiosity finally gets the better of you, and you walk toward the edge of the forest where the hills become lower and your phone occasionally manages to find a signal. As soon as the connection returns, messages begin arriving one after another, revealing that several days have passed without you responding. People want to know where you are. Some wonder when you are coming back. Others simply want to make sure that you are okay. You stand there looking at the screen for a while, reading through everything that has happened while you were away. For a moment, you begin typing a reply. Then you stop. You look back toward the forest. You think about the cabin, the fire, the books, the rain, and the strange sense of peace you have begun to feel there. The rest of the world suddenly seems very loud. So you put your phone back into your pocket and begin walking home. The cabin at night. That evening, the rain becomes heavier. It is still not dangerous, but the sound grows stronger as thousands of drops strike the roof above you, the porch outside, and the dense forest surrounding the cabin. You light a few candles even though the electricity is still working, because something about the softer light makes the cabin feel even more comfortable. You make tea, pull a blanket around your shoulders, and sit beside the fireplace while the rain continues outside. The room is warm, the windows are dark. The fire glows softly against the wooden walls. There is something deeply comforting about being indoors while the weather moves around you, because the storm belongs to the forest and the cabin belongs to you. And as you sit there listening, you begin to understand why rainy evenings can feel so peaceful. Rain makes ordinary things feel different. A warm drink seems warmer. A chair feels more comfortable, a book seems more interesting, and a quiet room suddenly feels like enough. The second week. Another week passes. The stream behind the cabin has grown wider, some of the forest paths have become muddy, and the ground has become so soft that your footsteps leave marks behind you whenever you walk. Moss grows more intensely green across fallen logs. Mushrooms begin appearing beside tree roots, and every surface seems to hold a thin layer of moisture. You also begin noticing animals more often. Birds shelter beneath branches. A fox occasionally appears behind the cabin. Once, while standing at the kitchen window, you see a deer at the edge of the clearing. It stands perfectly still in the rain, watching the cabin with the same quiet curiosity that you have been giving the forest. You remain there for several seconds, and then the deer turns and slowly disappears between the trees. The rain continues. You find yourself wondering where all of these animals go when the weather becomes too heavy. Perhaps they have always known how to live like this. Perhaps you are the strange one for still expecting the sky to change. What the rain does to time. After a while, the days begin to blend together. Without strong sunlight, morning and afternoon can look almost identical because there are no bright shadows moving across the floor and no golden light telling you exactly where the day has reached. The clock becomes more important. You begin checking it occasionally, not because you need to know the time, but because it reminds you that time is still moving, even when every day looks almost exactly like the one before it. You begin sleeping longer. You take slower walks. You read more. You think less. And something unexpected happens. You become comfortable with silence. Not complete silence, because there is never complete silence in the cabin, but the kind of silence that exists inside your own mind when there are fewer things asking for your attention. Thoughts that once felt urgent begin to lose their urgency. Old memories begin to return. You remember places you had forgotten, conversations you had not thought about for years, and tiny moments that once seemed unimportant. Nothing dramatic, nothing frightening, just memories quietly passing through your mind while the rain continues outside. The cabin begins to feel like home. One morning, you wake before sunrise. You stay in bed for a while, listening to the rain as it moves softly over the roof. Eventually, you walk downstairs in the darkness, light the fire, make something warm, and sit beside the window while the first gray light of morning begins to appear through the trees. And then you realize something. You have stopped thinking of the cabin as somewhere you are visiting. It has become home, at least for the moment. You know where everything is. You know which window gives you the best view of the forest. You know how much wood remains beside the fireplace. You know which trail leads to the stream. You know which floorboard creaks beneath your feet. You know the difference between light rain, heavy rain, and the deeper sound that arrives before a storm. Most importantly, you know what it feels like to have nowhere else to go. The storm. Then, one evening, something changes. The rain is still falling, but now you hear thunder far away beyond the forest. It is a deep, distant sound that rolls through the trees and slowly disappears into the hills. You move toward the window. Lightning briefly illuminates the entire forest, turning the trees into bright silhouettes for one sudden moment before the darkness returns. Another flash follows, then another. The rain becomes heavier. You close the curtains, check that the windows are secure, add another log to the fireplace, and settle into your chair. The storm continues outside, but inside the cabin, everything feels warm and protected. You listen to the thunder moving across the sky, then to the rain returning to its steady rhythm between each distant rumble. And strangely, instead of making you anxious, the storm makes the cabin feel even safer. There's something comforting about knowing that the weather is outside while you are here. The forest belongs to the storm. The cabin belongs to you. 18. A stormy night. Eventually, the thunder moves farther away. The rain becomes softer again, and you remain in the chair with your eyes half closed while the fire slowly burns lower. Water continues pouring from the roof in narrow streams. Branches sway gently outside, and the cabin makes small, quiet sounds as the wood expands and contracts in the changing temperature. You close your eyes. For a while, you imagine there is nowhere else in the world. No traffic, no crowded streets, no emails, no appointments. No alarms, nothing except this room, this fire, this chair, and the sound of rain. You breathe slowly, and after a while, you drift into sleep. Weeks become months. You stay longer than you ever intended. At first, you plan to remain for a few days, then perhaps another week. Eventually, you stop counting altogether because the number no longer seems important. The world outside becomes something distant, something you remember but no longer feel connected to. Your life is measured by simple things now: meals, fires, walks, books, sleep, and rainfall. You become stronger from carrying wood from the storage shed. You become calmer from walking through the forest. You become quieter from spending so much time alone. And perhaps the biggest surprise is that you stop missing the busyness you once thought you needed. You discover that there is a difference between having nothing to do and having enough time to notice what is already around you. The forest changes. By now, the landscape has begun to transform. The stream has become something closer to a small river. Low areas of the forest have turned into shallow ponds, and moss has begun spreading across rocks and tree trunks that were once dry and bare. Fallen leaves collect in thick layers. New plants appear along the water. Everything is greener. Everything is wetter. The forest looks alive in a way you had not noticed when you first arrived. One day you walk along the same trail you explored during your first week, and you barely recognize it. Water has changed the shape of the path. Plants have grown through the soft soil. The stream has widened. And yet, when you finally reach the clearing, the cabin looks almost exactly as it did on your first day. Its roof catches the rain. Its windows glow softly. Smoke rises from the chimney. It feels like a small dry island in a world of water. The question. Eventually, you begin wondering how long this can continue. You know that rain cannot simply fall forever. At least, you assume it cannot. There must eventually be a break in the clouds. There must be a morning when the sky becomes blue again. There must be sunlight somewhere above those endless layers of gray. So you begin imagining what that first clear morning would look like. You imagine waking up and hearing nothing at all. No rain, no tapping, no rushing water, just silence. You imagine opening the curtains and seeing sunlight spreading across the forest. You imagine walking outside and feeling warmth on your face. You imagine the trees shining with water beneath a blue sky. Part of you desperately wants to see it, but another part of you has become strangely attached to the rain, the first silence. One morning, you wake up and immediately know that something is different. You do not hear the sound you have heard every morning since arriving. You lie still for a moment, listening carefully. Nothing. You sit up. Still nothing. Then you understand. The rain has stopped. You walk downstairs and stand in the middle of the cabin, almost unsure what to do with the silence. Then you open the front door. The forest outside is covered in water, and mist floats above the ground, but not a single drop is falling from the sky. For the first time in months, the air is still. Then a narrow beam of sunlight appears through the clouds and lands across the forest floor. You step outside. Birds begin singing. Water sparkles on the leaves. The stream catches the light, and for a long time, you simply stand there. The world seems impossibly bright the day the rain stops. You spend the entire morning outside. The clouds slowly separate above the trees and patches of blue sky appear between them. Sunlight moves across the forest, warming the wooden walls of the cabin and drying the wet earth. You sit on the porch and allow the warmth to reach your face. It feels wonderful, and yet, beneath that happiness, you discover something unexpected. You miss the rain. You miss the sound against the roof. You miss the soft gray light. You miss the feeling of being protected inside the cabin while the rest of the world remained somewhere beyond the windows. The rain had become part of your life, not something you had endured, but something you had learned to live with. And now that it was gone, the cabin felt different. The rain returns. That evening, clouds begin gathering again over the forest. A cool breeze moves through the trees. The sky darkens. Then you feel the first drop on your hand. One, then another, then dozens. Within minutes, the rain begins falling across the clearing, and the familiar sound returns to the roof, the porch, the trees, and the wet earth. You smile without thinking about it. Then you walk inside, close the door, light the fire, and sit beside the window. The sound surrounds you again. Rain on the roof, rain on the leaves, rain on the porch, rain moving through the forest. And somehow, after all this time, it feels like coming home. What if you stayed forever? Now imagine that the rain truly did continue forever. Not for weeks, not for months, but for years. Imagine the forest becoming permanently wet, the streams becoming wider, moss covering almost every surface, and the cabin slowly aging while the same endless rainfall continued around it. Imagine generations of trees growing beneath gray clouds. Imagine a world where sunlight became something you remembered more often than something you saw. And through all of it, the cabin remained warm, dry, and quiet, like a tiny refuge surrounded by an endless ocean of rain. Perhaps one day the cabin would become a story, a strange place somewhere beyond the roads where somebody had once stayed while the rain never stopped. Maybe, years from now, another traveler would follow the same narrow road through the forest. They would see the warm light in the window. They would step onto the porch. They would knock on the door, and perhaps you would open it. A different kind of life. Perhaps living in a cabin where it rained forever would not really be a punishment, Perhaps it would be an invitation to slow down and notice things that are usually hidden beneath the noise of ordinary life. There would be no reason to rush through breakfast, no reason to hurry through a walk, no reason to check the clock every few minutes. You would begin noticing the sound of water, the changing color of the forest, the warmth of the fireplace, the smell of wood, the movement of clouds, and all the small details that usually disappear beneath a busy schedule. Most of us spend our lives waiting for the next thing. The next morning, the next weekend, the next holiday, the next vacation, the next year. But here, there would be nowhere to rush toward. The rain would fall, the fire would burn, the forest would grow, and you would simply be there. 27. The sound of rain. So, for a moment, imagine the cabin around you again. The walls are warm, the lights are low, the fire is glowing quietly. The windows are covered in tiny drops of water. Outside, the forest disappears into the darkness, and the rain continues. You do not need to know how long it has been raining, and you do not need to know when it will stop. There is only this room, this chair, this fire, this sound. Rain falling softly across the roof. Rain moving through the trees, rain finding its way into every corner of the forest. And beneath all of it, there is the slow and steady rhythm of your own breathing, night after night. Imagine going to sleep in this cabin every night. The same sound would be waiting outside. The same warm room would be waiting inside. The same forest would surround the windows. And the same soft rain would continue long after you closed your eyes. Eventually, you would stop noticing it consciously. It would become part of your sleep, something familiar, something comforting, something that tells your mind that you are safe and that there is nothing you need to do right now. And perhaps after enough nights had passed, you would begin dreaming about the cabin itself. You might dream about walking through the forest. You might dream about sunlight. You might dream about cities, oceans, mountains, or places you had never visited. And when you woke up, the rain would still be there, quietly reminding you where you were, the cabin in your memory. Perhaps years later you would finally leave. Maybe one day the rain would stop for good and you would return to the world you once knew. You would drive along the same road, pass through the same forest, and eventually reach a city again where there were traffic lights, crowded streets, ringing phones, conversations, schedules, and the constant movement of ordinary life. And somewhere in the middle of all of that noise, you would remember the cabin. You would remember the rain. You would remember the warmth. You would remember how simple life felt when the only thing you needed to listen to was water falling from the sky. And perhaps the next time rain arrived in your own home, you would sit beside a window, close your eyes, and listen. For a moment, you would be back there, the endless evening. So imagine that tonight you are still in the cabin. It is late. The fire has burned low. The rain is soft. The forest is dark. You are sitting beside the window with a warm blanket around your shoulders, listening as the rain traces slow paths across the glass. You do not have to get up. You do not have to go anywhere. The cabin is quiet. The forest is quiet, and the rain keeps the rest of the world at a comfortable distance. You watch a drop of water move slowly down the window. It joins another drop, then another. Outside, millions of droplets are falling at once, disappearing into the forest floor, flowing into streams, filling the river, feeding the plants, and beginning the same cycle all over again. You feel your eyes becoming heavier. Your thoughts are moving more slowly now. The fire is warm, the room is quiet, and the rain is still falling. Good night. Perhaps the rain will stop tomorrow. Perhaps it will continue. Perhaps the clouds will break apart and sunlight will return. Or perhaps another storm will arrive and cover the forest in darkness once again. It does not really matter, because tonight you are here. The cabin is warm, the forest surrounds you, and the rain is falling. You do not need to listen to every word anymore. You do not need to remember what happens next. You can simply let the story fade into the background while the sound of rain remains. Imagine the droplets touching the roof. Imagine the trees moving gently in the wind. Imagine the fire glowing softly beside you. And as your thoughts become quieter, imagine yourself lying upstairs in the small wooden room, wrapped in warm blankets, while the sound of rain moves gently across the roof above you. There are no alarms, no traffic, no deadlines, nothing waiting for you, only the rain, falling endlessly through the darkness. And perhaps if the rain truly did continue forever, this would not be such a bad place to stay. Perhaps some places are not meant to be escaped. Perhaps some places simply give us permission to rest. So close your eyes, take a slow breath, and listen. The rain is still falling. The fire is still burning. The cabin is still warm. And tonight, you can stay here for as long as you like. Good night. And remember, what if?